So the first speaker is Matthew Wright, and he's going to talk about a wide area testbed for Tor.
Okay, thanks, Mark. This is joint with, let's see if I can figure this out. This is joint with Roger and David at Tor, Pratik Mittal and Nick Feemster at Princeton, and Rob Jansen from the U.S. Naval Research Lab. So Tor is this anonymous communication system that helps provide, I'm kidding, I'm not going to go through Tor. If you don't know about Tor, this would be a good time to check your email or do something else, because this is really only relevant to Tor researchers, or if someone later wants to just, be throwing insults during the question and answer period, then, maybe stay awake for that. But so Tor, as we have seen at PETS and lots of other places, there are lots and lots of research papers that talk about doing different things with Tor. So, for example, providing website fingerprinting defense, or providing defenses against AS-level adversaries or Raptor-style attacks. Trying to increase the speed of Tor by doing some different things with Tor path selection, or adding trust to the network, dealing with things like guard sets, where you want to put where you want to have all the guards be grouped together and then provide better anonymity properties. Or you want to study attacks, right? You want to have some way to figure out, can we attack Tor because it does this or that, and then what can we do to fix it? So all of these things, of course, when you're doing them, need some kind of evaluation. And there's a lot of options for doing that kind of evaluation. So you can do live Tor tests, right? This has the advantage of being very realistic because it's actually in Tor. On the other hand, you might actually de-anonymize some users or harm their performance, so that's not so cool. And of course, you can only change the nodes that you actually control. It is hard to change other people's nodes, and so it's, that's a limitation in terms of if you want to do something where you go, okay, well now let's suppose that all the Tor nodes do X. Well, you can't really test that. Option 2 is, and lots of us do this, some kind of high fidelity or low fidelity simulation or emulation, such as Tor path simulator, Tor PS, or the changing of the guards, cogs, if you're just doing path selection type of things. And then if you want the high fidelity stuff, so you get at least down to where there is some kind of network going on, you get Shadow or Experiment or this new thing, Sneak, that's come out. And these provide full control over all the Tor nodes that you have, and you're not putting users at risk, so that's good. But of course, there's not the real internet underneath it. At best, you're getting some emulated network, and of course, you don't have real users. Not that we're going to solve that with a testbed, but option 3, we can have overlay experiments. This is probably like the worst option. So this is like, there's real networking, right? So it's not, packets actually travel over real wires over some distance, not very large distances though, and it's not the real internet. The best that you can get is that in Deter, I believe that some of the stuff is in Northern California and some of the stuff is in Southern California, and so it goes over a really high-speed connection between that. It doesn't really give you the real internet. And you definitely don't get much for scalability, so that's not a very good solution. Then there's another option with overlay experiments is Planet Lab. So here you have the advantage of you get the real internet, so that's good. But one problem is you have some shared resources. So in Planet Lab, you get these things called slices. So you get a VM, and your VM gets into a node for a period of time, and it can send some network packets, or it can pull some network packets out of queues that are sitting there having collected those network packets in the time that it was kicked out, but then you get kicked out. And so you might get kicked out, let's say you're the blue slice, so your experiment is in T1 here and then T2, And then you can get kicked out for, maybe 1,000 milliseconds or a full second or more, which if you're trying to do like high fidelity experiments in terms of the timing of something, whether that's an attack experiment or a performance related experiment, it turns out, well, okay, that's not so good. So yeah, if you're doing these end-to-end correlation attacks, congestion-based attacks, throughput fingerprinting, or latency leaks, right, all of these things would not be very effectively tested on Planet Lab because it's not exactly as responsive as you would expect. All right, so what are we proposing? Well, how about a Tor testbed where you could do something that would actually serve both research and testing? And we imagine that, so we have this, so what most people use, some form of high fidelity simulation or emulation, and sometimes you can use a little bit of actual Tor, a live Tor testing, and then sometimes you have, and then at some point, someone will say, okay, well, here's this really good idea, and Tor will be like, well, we'll test it locally in our little network, and then, well, I guess we'll try and deploy it, or not take that risk with users one way or the other. And we'd like to fill that gap, right, with a test bed that is a wide area test bed, so it offers like realistic internet, so there's like the actual internet underneath, accurate timing, real internet ASs, that's capital S, sorry, real internet ASs, and would allow people to test out their ideas in both attack and defense, or performance or whatever, and test them out in the test bed so that there's some more high fidelity testing, realistic testing that can be done before it actually would be considered for deployment in Tor. And we imagine that it could have flexible configuration, so you can test with a few nodes, you can test with lots of nodes, you can test with more clients and more congestion, fewer clients, and lower congestion, and so on. Okay, in a couple minutes, I'm going to stop talking and actually turn it over to you. This is what I'll be asking you. These are the questions for you. Could your research benefit from this kind of testbed? Right? If you are interested in doing Tor research, or you're working currently on Tor research, would it be useful to have a testbed like this? Even if you're not specifically working on it, are there interesting research ideas that you think this would make possible, even if it's not suitable, especially research that can't really be effectively tested with the current methods of Tor testing? What kind of requirements would you have for this testbed? Right? What kind of specific things do you think this testbed really needs to have in order to be effective for the kinds of research you want to do with it? And then also, if you're thinking about, well, there's this thing that was published like 7 years ago, and it's still a really good idea, and it's not in Tor today. And probably the reason it's not in Tor today is because we can't do a really good test of it that would convince everybody that it's not just good, but it's also like stable in the network or whatnot. So what existing Tor proposals do you think should be beta tested so that they could actually have a good chance to be deployed? So I'll have you tell me about those in a minute, so be thinking about them. Some key challenges that we are aware of and we know will have to be addressed in order to do this well. I think one of the hardest ones is modeling user traffic. Right? So we could come up with some fake users and have them do some fake things, but maybe we want them to actually be downloading websites, right? Or doing some bulk downloads, real bulk downloads. How much of that do we really want to be doing when it's a bunch of fake users? Do we instead want to offer some kind of, hey, we have this network. We might be attacking your privacy, but feel free to use it. It's not safe at all, but go ahead and use it as an option to get real users. How do we do time sharing? So we don't want to do the thing with Planet Lab where they slice you in and out at any given moment. So you want a period of time that you're going to be doing experiments. So how do we set it up so that different people, like multiple people, want to do multiple experiments all at the same kind of time? So you have to kind of decide who's going to go first and how long you set that up. How do you do scheduling? How are we going to pick the locations for the Tor nodes? right? So realistically, we can't just put them exactly where Tor nodes are right now. Although we can put a lot probably in some of the same hosting providers that are popularly used in Tor. Realistically, we'll probably have some academic deployment. We'll probably have some cloud deployment or something like that. And maybe some volunteers, but how do we best make sure that we get something that looks realistic in terms of sampling a good number of locations in the internet? And then even if we had such a test bed, there are some things that are probably not actually going to work and not be testable. What are those things, right? So what are the limitations of this also as a test bed? All right, so that is the end. I will put this up at the very end of the talk so that you can see our contact information, but then I will go back to the questions for you slide, and that's it. Okay.